Hi, I'm Jen Giffen from Shooks and Gift the podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Those are both questions from Tanks 101, in case you're curious. Why the president one is, I'm not really sure. Sorry, I was a little preachy there. I had to finish that out.
I'm getting on my next one. No, I'm getting on one right after that, okay? Soapbox moment. So you'd think that Josh and I would have this all figured out by now. You know, the high-tech podcast, 50-something episodes in. Maybe we'd be able to just show up, record, no big deal. What do you think, Josh?
Wrong. Wrong.
This is our third attempt, I think, at starting this episode. So we're doing great tonight.
We've taken a break a little bit here, so you know we're out of practice. I'll blame it on that.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, it's clearly that.
We are back, folks. For us, it feels a little weird. We've been off for a couple weeks recording. I've been traveling. We've been here, there, and everywhere. Of course, the episodes have gone on as usual. That means we're doing our job correctly.
Yeah, we're still releasing stuff.
Exactly.
Even though we've been depressed by certain movies and we've been on trips.
Yeah. Morbius, not necessarily the best, but
yeah,
until the next Marvel movie that blows us out of the water, Doctor Strange, we will just continue on with the higher ed educational technology podcast, otherwise known as High Tech Podcast. It's like I forgot what we're even called.
Yeah, what? We're not even what?
Yeah.
Crazy. We're doing so great.
If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like us on Twitter. We are at High Tech Podcast. Love interactions there. There's been more interactions in that space recently. I really appreciate
we've been doing some stuff.
Brian with his Fresh at 5 podcast. He has been kind of looking at our episodes and giving us some feedback on Twitter. Really appreciate that, Brian. Thank you, sir.
So far, it's been positive. We might change our opinion if you hate us later. No, I'm just joking.
We accept all criticism until it's bad. So
it's until it's actually criticism.
We've even been receiving emails at our inbox at hightechpod.us.
.us. There was a poll recently that determined this.
I don't know about that.
It's it's there. Yeah, we got emails. People sent us some stuff. I'm like super excited. We've been doing this for a little bit the last couple weeks, asking for images. I say the last couple weeks like we just started it, but it's been like a month and a half now.
By the time this episode airs, yes, it'll be like 2 months. Who even knows?
We got some people. Somebody drew us an anteater. I'm so excited. We asked for an anteater taking a selfie, and somebody drew us one. Hand drew an anteater.
It's amazing.
Taking a selfie.
Yes, thank you, Manny, if you're listening. We appreciate that engagement. But we also loved the drawing, so wonderful.
It was solid.
Yeah. What should they send us this week, Josh? At inbox at hightechpod.us.
.us. No, I said it wrong. No, you tricked me. You tricked me. I'm so angry.
Got you.
I would like a picture of a snake wearing a top hat.
You heard it here first, folks.
You tricking me made me think of betrayal, which made me think of a snake, and then I was like, how could I
make this harder?
I'm gonna make this harder, and I'm like, you know what? Top hat. I feel like a top hat. So a snake with a top hat. Email us that image if you're listening to this episode. It'd be great.
That is perfect. And last but not least, if you've done that, if you've done everything so far, you've liked us, you sent us an email, you've continued listening to this episode, I don't know why. Make sure to check out our website, hodtechpod.us, where
Hodtech?
Okay. That's the mistake you wanted to point out tonight? Not everything else we're dealing with. That's the thing.
It was the thing. Mainly because you were going to say TUS, and I wanted to cut it off before you got there.
Perfect. hightechpod.us. Gosh.
Oh, man. We're doing so good.
All of our episodes are there. All of our interviews are there. A link to the Education Podcast Network is there if you want to go check out the EduPod Network and any of our fellow hosts that are on the network. We'd love to see us engage across those communities. If there's somebody out there talking about ed tech better or in newer ways than us, let us know. We want to bring them into the network, but we also want to have conversations with them. Still working on some of those conversations, getting some people together across the podcasts even. So everything is good. All right. That's the shtick. We've gotten started. I know that once we've done something, a really good practice is to reflect on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you've learned something new, if you've worked on like art or something, there's always time when you're done with something or once you've at least gotten the first draft together to reflect on it. And so we know that this is a transversal topic. It goes across topics. And so we want to make sure that today with the conversation on reflection, we emphasize all the different ways that it can come up and work for you both practically or just even in your classroom. Do you reflect on things?
No, never. I move on from life. No, I'm just trying.
Immediately, just never looking backwards.
It's just done. Past, no baggage, new life. No, yeah, I mean, like, we all, I think, whether we want to admit it or not, we reflect on things. My time is often in a shower or a car.
Okay.
While
first one, TMI. Second one, continue.
Okay. Well, it's the sum. They may be like, hey, I think in showers too. That's great. We're now kindred spirits. And you'd be right, as long as we do it in separate showers. But, like, yeah, so I reflect, right? It's often, like, outside of education space, right? It's often us, like, reflecting on life or how things went or a certain situation. Or today while teaching, I, in the car back am mentally reflecting on the things I did well and the things that I should never do again. Like there's
and hoping to balance that list.
Yes, and hoping to balance that list. Hoping one list is longer than the other, which it isn't always. But like you're always reflecting on things. You're looking back on things. I think people who say they don't are liars. Because you're reflecting at some point. People reflect. It's a part of us. Now I will say this. I don't think we reflect a lot in education. I think this is why we brought this topic up, because we're finding, I've been learning over the last couple of years, is the more I'm digging into educational theory and what I'm doing in my job, reflection is important. You can't just throw a bunch of content at someone, or give a bunch of information or a bunch of projects and not reflect on stuff. Actually, in my opinion, a good amount of learning happens on the reflection side, right? Yeah. Where you get to do something and you get to reflect on how that went. Or what you got out of it, even reflecting on how you were learning, what you were learning. Those components do, I think, two things that I found helpful, which is help the learner process what they're learning and help you as the instructor or teacher get whether, are they actually getting what we're talking about, right? Are they actually understanding what we're trying to learn?
We're delivering a training series at my work right now. And one of the factoids we have in there, with our sources, etc., but is that like about 25% of content is retained after a 1 hour session of instruction. If you do some math real quick, that's 15 minutes. A quarter of your time is what people actually maybe hold on to and remember. But while that fact may be true, right? If we just put somebody in an hour lecture, say, listen to this, good luck, they walk away with 25% of it. We can address that percentage with interaction, with stimulation, with changing in your motivation, with, like we're saying today, reflection. Any of these things that we bring into that same hour-long experience will improve that retention percentage. I mean, that's what we understand in cognitive theory, and frankly, if that doesn't work, why the hell do we have any jobs anyways? If people can't learn an hour's worth of content, then there's no purpose in having, right, people who help teach and people who make content that's longer than 15 minutes long. If we could never do that, there'd be no point in ever teaching that length of time. And yet we know people can learn from it. It can work. We just need to make sure that there are the right practices involved in the delivery, but also training the student on their reception. And I think, like you made a great point, Josh, that you're thinking of reflection even from the teacher's side. You're reflecting on your practices to make sure that next time you do better. we need to make sure that that's explicit or, at the front for our students too. They need to know that practice.
Yeah, they need to work through that practice, one, for their own benefit beyond just learning, but like learning how to learn. Like whereas in any instruction we're in, we're both teaching the content, topic, aspect, skill, or whatever it may be that we're teaching. But we're also teaching them how to learn those things. Like we're teaching them how in the future they're going to eventually learn that better. If we think they end our class being experts in everything they need to in the field that they're going into or the class that we're talking about, then we're insane, and we need to work on that. But like, they're going to have to keep learning, right? And so that's a piece we're trying to teach them and train them on how to do, right? And so part of that is definitely reflection. I think it's helpful. I think we should talk about why. Okay, so maybe we've hammered home maybe a little bit like, okay, we get it, Will and Josh, you think reflection's important, but explain the why. Okay, so I think like let's bounce some ideas off, right? So I've got one of the top ones for me, right, is for the learner themselves, reflection helps the learner identify what they've actually learned. Like helps them, it's a recall thing too. I think for me, reflection and recall get kind of integrated a lot mentally because in reflection, you're kind of processing.
You have to do one with the other, in a sense.
Yeah, you have to do one with the other in a sense. And so I find a lot of benefit in that. It does get them to take it deeper and work with the concept and kind of flex the concept, so to speak, with what they're doing. But it's also kind of helpful in an element of recall, where it's helping them kind of identify what they've learned or what they're taking away from it, that type of situation. So I found that very helpful. Well, and that's instruction sense.
It's really good to raise that, Josh, because I think it is. I would hope it's sequential. Quizzes and our tests and things challenge our learners to recall information, so they're probably more familiar with that practice, right? Who was the first president of the United States of America? What is the steering console in a Panzer tank, right? Like these questions are the recall questions our students need to know.
But those are both questions from Tanks 101, in case you were curious. Why the president one is, I'm not really sure, but they're there. Don't you worry.
They're in the class. Yeah, we've written
Tanks
these
101.
quizzes.
TNK 101.
So, but like once you've gotten past that recall step, there's something that I think it helps us extend that knowledge further and even retain it better. Like if I reflect on it, so not only do I know George Washington was the first president, but I want to kind of think through like, well, why was he? What happened when he became? When was he? And actually answering some of those other recall questions helps you start to reflect on the fact that like George Washington was the first president of the United States of America, but we had a leader before George Washington from 1776 to 1789 or something like that. I forget the exact dates. Right, it's not my shtick. Yeah.
But he didn't pass Tanks 101.
I didn't. If I had passed Tanks, I would have known these factoids about others. Clearly. But like that practice of reflecting on George Washington, not just recalling the fact that he was our first president, but reflecting on him as the first president, will lead me to other knowledge and will help reinforce all of that knowledge. It's one big happy family of remembering things better. That's it. It helps you remember things better. Just recalling the fact, easy. Recalling the fact more times, great. Recalling the fact and connecting it to other facts, this is where we have the balance between recall and retention. If I can recall the information, great. But if I can retain it over time, that means it's making it into long-term memory. And I believe then you as the person learning knows the information. Once you've got to retention, you know it. If you're just recalling a fact, I can't recall to you any of the facts from my Algebra 1 course. There's a Pythagorean theorem. Yeah. I know that. There we go. I got one thing.
I remember that part. Yeah, and the something's the powerhouse of the cell, right? Like I remember that. That's not for math, but I remember that.
Mitochondria?
Maybe? Yeah, there we go.
Maybe. Somebody fact check us. We don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, fact check us on that one. But anyway, yeah, right. So it takes it to it's a deeper level at a certain point. And I will say this: the other thing that I think my top, I don't know, I'm done giving numbers. Other top reason of why I think I like reflection is because it also gives. This ties to a topic we've talked about before in a different episode. just recently that we released, that I'm trying to remember the number now.
Give me some information. Maybe I can get to the number.
It's cognitive load.
Episode 51.
51. Okay. So just recently we talked about cognitive load. Reflection also gives us a chance to take a break from all the new stuff, all the hammering of this content or this task or this skill or this ability, and just take a break and look back on what you've done or what you've been talking about, what you've been discussing, and think back on it, reflect on it, and kind of give yourself a break to get a healthy pace within that kind of grueling aspect that can be learning sometimes, right? It kind of helps fight back against the overwhelmingness of learning, while at the same time helping us to recall, think through at a deeper level the topics, and even do a little bit of thinking about how we're learning, or why we're making decisions, or why we're giving certain answers, or what we're doing. I think a good example, and I'm gonna put this out here right now. I've been teaching more now for in a more of a formal sense than I have before, and I'm starting to realize that I know a lot of things and need to be better at actually applying them to what I'm doing when teaching. So now I will say this: I know how to turn on Zoom, people. Okay, so
you've got some of the functional stuff, but now
I've got the functional stuff. Yeah, but I'm working on some things, and I've been realizing there's some elements where I think I've done reflection well and where I could implement it better. Like even today, I was hammering through these topics of like, okay, here is how different interpretations from a passage that you can do, right? And so there's different categories that they're fitting into. At one aspect, I think I did well at asking them to kind of reflect on, gave them, 3 different passages they look at, categorize them, and then after that, reflect on why they made the decisions that they did about what they did, right? So like trying to get them to process what their processing was, not just they randomly picked 3. Although my favorite was I should have maybe picked more because they got through 2 of them and they were like, well, that's just the category for the third one. And most of them were like, that just seems like the right one because we already did the other 2. Yep.
Selection bias in the quiz. It's like, I should have. Dang it.
Should have divided that out a little bit better. So there's a way I could have done it better. But I could have taken reflection a little bit farther in that instance, realizing afterwards where like we talked about some of these ideas, but then actually having them find passages that fit into this topic and reflect on which categories they think they are without even giving them options. Right. Reflect on what other things they've seen that could fit into these categories so that they could better think through even their own past experience of how these categories work. And that also helps me as an instructor gauge even further, are they actually getting what I'm saying, or was it luck the first time? Or did I have selection bias in the midst of it? Like, so there's elements of the way I think you could take reflection deeper, and give it more of a break.
Well, and I hate to do this, but like that really leads up or tees up a connection to episode 50 about talk time, right? If you're giving your students opportunities to reflect on their process and potentially better reinforce what they're learning, you're going to see your talk time drop because they need time to think, they need time to process, and you might actually see their talk time increase because based on their reflections, you'd hope that they're going to maybe ask more questions. Like, so this is like a really great cycle here of our last few episodes where reflection not only reduces cognitive load, hopefully provides breathers between subjects so that the students themselves can just have a moment, relax, take a breath, but then you can connect this to how you want them to be working in kind of the rhythms of the classroom, like who's talking when, how much talking's happening, are they asking questions, are they not? Man, it's like we do education or something, It's like we like this. You can connect all these ideas together and make a better classroom out of it.
Now, I will say this. I want to tag in just a little bit here. When we're talking reflection, Will and I have been talking a lot about like in-class experiences. When it comes to online, this doesn't look that much different. It's just building into an online course that's sequenced out, like building in specific activities or situations for students to reflect on content from that week or from a past assignment or from a past activity. Scaffolding a large project, hypothetically.
What's that?
and building it out so that, I don't know, the project isn't due the last second of the class, that maybe it's due slightly early, like a week earlier.
Why would you
so that
have
there's
to
some
do
point
that?
to reflect. And I get pushback from instructors, understandably, in some of these areas, because they'll be like, the student will be done with the project, they don't want to engage in that last part. And to my argument would be, okay, those that don't engage, they miss out on something. Like, at the end of the day,
Or require it.
you've
Put a point
given
on it.
put a point on it, put a requirement on it. They may not take it seriously, but that's to them. They have to own up at a certain point in those areas.
Right.
But you've at least provided an opportunity for the students who care and want to be involved in that to engage and reflect, or by putting a grade on it, have forced them to get into that practice and show that an end of something is not always just the due date. It's not the end. There is something else that can be productive after you've finished the product. Sorry, I was getting onto a sandbox, a little preachy there. I had to finish that out. You do you.
I'm getting on my next one. No, I'm getting on one right after that, okay? Soapbox moment. If you want to be a teacher, you must expect your students to be learners. When I hear that, I've heard that argument way too many. They're not going to do it. Yeah, if you don't expect them to do it, if you don't give them points, if you don't give them motivation, if you don't require, if you don't build it into your curriculum, it is up to you as the teacher to make them do the learning at some level. Like you have to make a path. Let me put it that way. That's a better way to put it. You have to make the path for them to walk. It is still up to them to them to walk, but the excuse that, like, I'm not gonna put this little I'm not gonna put this bench on my pathway towards the end of the path because they're not gonna sit on the bench. It's on a path. They might sit. Give them the bench. It is an important practice, and frankly, you need to set the expectations that they need to be learners. I have heard, have you heard this? I have heard from so many faculty, even people now in my corporate space, they're just not going to do it. That's true. If you don't set it up, build it, and expect them to do it. They are the learners. You are the teacher. Set the teaching up and expect them to be the learners. Set the expectation for them to do it. I don't know why I'm so riled up about that, but because
well, and to use your metaphor, like, this is specifically a reflection, right? Because I think your metaphor is really good, because, like, let's use the bench metaphor in the path, right? Because at a certain point, reflection is that break. It's that break to look back on the path that you walk by. Let's just hypothetically say you're right. Let's go depressing numbers, right? Let's say 40% of the students actively engage in the reflection thing, okay? And 60% of them don't, okay? And you put that bench there. What's the worst that's happened? 60% did what they were going to do anyway, and they passed by towards the end of the path and finished the course. But the other 40% got to sit on that bench. And if you hadn't put the bench there, 60% of them would have been fine with the bench not being there. And the other 40% would have been like, where's my bench? I'm exhausted. Why don't I get to, like...
Right.
There's an element of this where, like, at the end of the day, to your point, we set the expectations, we try to do it, and hope that the students will engage. Sure, if almost every student doesn't engage, maybe rethink what you're doing, and figure it out. But what's the harm in trying that component?
Yep.
Right? And I think for me, this is fairly real, because we've tried to build in, like, we now, you know this, Will, in the place I'm working at, we did a learning sequence that's a part of what happens, right? Each week in our online courses. And so part of that sequence is at the end of the course, there's a specific reflection activity every week. Now, is it a little overkill? Maybe sometimes. Okay, I get it. They're accelerated courses as well, so people are trying to fly through content. But I see sometimes we get pushback where they want every assignment to be just them providing this content that they have to get through and submitting this thing. And to a certain extent, if we want our students to actually learn, we should want as much as we can to build in some of those reflection guideposts that allow students to look back on what they've done that week or previous assignments or previous parts of the activity so that they can process what they did, why they did it, and learn more about what they learned, right? Think more deeply and go to another level on what they did, or learn from their mistakes, learn from the things that they did in past activities. There's just a whole bunch of benefit to being able to have them have a chance to look back. And whether that's actively questions in the course or built in sequence-wise in an online course where you've got actual activities for them to do this for. I see great benefit in it.
So you were driving earlier to get us to the whys so that we didn't go too far with the, this is the high-tech podcast. We go in the squiggly lines that we want to.
Yeah.
But I'm coming back to one of the whys, and I think that this is relevant to what you were just saying. We know that, and we find in experience that reflecting helps us retain information. Like, that's the science learning element that's good here. Cool. One of the things that's important, though, about putting reflection activities, reflection experiences into your learning sequences is that, like everything else as a teacher, you have to model best behavior. You have to model the best level or the expert level of knowledge, right? So you, as the person on the podium, you as the sage on the stage, are the model for the student in what they want to learn and accomplish. If you weren't there, they would just be reading Wikipedia pages and watching YouTube videos, right? So they are trying to emulate you. When we come back to reflection, this is not a common practice. This is not something that everyone does well or efficiently or consistently. I find myself to be fairly introspective. I think a lot about my life, about my experience. Josh, you led with that. Like, we all kind of just think at times about things we're doing. And you said, if you think you don't, you're a liar. That was a great way to start the episode. But even if we all think, and we all think about things consistently, it doesn't mean we're doing it helpfully or effectively. So if I'm taking my Tanks 101 course, philosophy of tanks, and I'm in the first week where I'm just identifying types of tanks, a little bit of history of tanks course here. If I need to reflect on that knowledge and think about the value of tanks in life, like, I want to try and situate that in something that's relevant to my life. Like, I want to be a tank engineer. Really helpful. I'm going to think about these tanks as it relates to what tanks I might make in the future. If I do not have that reflection point, and I don't have that engagement with the content, what am I doing? I'm just going to be like taking the information in, like, yeah, I'm getting tank information. Great. Trivia. Useful. But connecting it to your actual life experience of, I want to make tanks, brings so much more color to that experience. When people go out and they drive on the streets and they almost hit someone, their first response is not usually, wow, what was the rate at which I was driving? Why didn't I use my turn signal? What was the conditions of the rain, right? Their first response is some colorful sign language and some colorful spoken language, right? That's what people do in the moment. And like, that's, I think, a helpful experience to say, after you almost hit the bicyclist, maybe you should be thinking about, why didn't I see the bicyclist? What's the connection of that bicyclist to me driving? Oh, my city just put in new bike lanes, and so the bicyclists are now in their bike lanes sharing the street with me more. They're not on sidewalks. These are things that you start to reflect on and process what the impact is to your life as you continue driving in your city, right? It feels a little disparate to say tanks and then bicycling accidents, stuff like that. But I think the practice is the same. If we're not aware of those things, and if we're just going through life or going through our courses, throwing the middle finger at things because that's our reaction to something, we're not going to take moments to connect it to what matters. And what matters is how it relates to us and how we can be people, how, in the case of the accident situation, hopefully be better people and not hit bicyclists, right? But in the tanks situation, like, the educational impact is that we can really relate it to ourselves and understand how it impacts our life and why we're doing it. And that starts to activate motivation and engagement and good things. So many good things. So, we need to put reflection into our courses to demonstrate that this is a helpful practice, because not everyone does it. And even if they do it, not everyone does it well. The well-being with consistency, well-being after milestones, well-being, I'm trying to define, like, what does it mean to think or reflect well? Every day, after you complete something, when you failed something, when you've actually done something well, these are all opportunities to reflect and say, how did that come to be? Because if you understand how you did the thing that happened, you can reproduce it, or in the case of failures, avoid it.
Yeah.
Good. These are all good things.
Nailed it. Perfectly. Now, here's the thing. Will, I feel like if only have you ever heard somebody go, is there an app for that? You know? You ever hear that phrase tossed around before?
Yeah, I think I have. Actually, probably around this show a lot.
Yeah, maybe
frankly.
occasionally. You know, so like, I really wish there was an app for reflection.
Just like a reflection app, right?
Yeah, like almost like, you know, like Reflection.App feels like...
We should buy it. That's a great idea.
We should wait a second. If you haven't caught on from this really
wonderfully done impromptu. Josh and I will reflect on this later. It's fine. It won't happen.
Yeah, it's
ever
fine.
Again.
This wonderful, subversive transition. Our app today is called Reflection.App. It works perfectly, right? We talk about reflection, and then we're like, oh, check it out. There's an app called Reflection.App.
I really want to talk to these folks and like understand, do they call themselves Reflection App or do they just call themselves Reflection? And their website, their website is www.reflection.app. A-P-P.
Yeah.
Like it's beautiful. It is wonderful marketing. There's no there's no nothing. If you go to iTunes Store or whatever they call that these days, Apple App Store, and if you go to the Google Play Store,
whatever
it's had 17 names. I don't know. If you put in Reflection App, just that, you're going to find the Reflection App. You'll find Reflection. It is beautiful. It's easy. I came across this, as you might expect. Yeah, usually it's me finding apps. Because Josh and I were talking about the fact that we wanted to talk about reflection, and I just put the word reflection into Google. I mean, this is clandestine. It is as simple as it gets for us. There's no fun story.
It all just came together. Now, I'll be upfront, right, about this, is that I've only looked at this app a little bit, right? We, like, took a look at it. You, though, found it, and we're like, I'm going to start using it. And you've, like, consistently used Reflection app, right? I mean, this has been, like, a consistent thing for you now?
That we, like, found this, like, a month ago. Maybe a month and a half ago.
Yeah. Maybe like a month and a half.
I've used it almost every day since then. And it's pretty nuts. So, let me break it down. Let me sum up real quick.
Yeah. Drop some knowledge
Drop them
on us.
beats of knowledge. First things first, okay? If you go to Reflection.App, I'm not even going to get into the functional purposes and how it, frankly, in my opinion, it meets everything we just set up as to why you should reflect. We're going to get there. My favorite part so far, you go to Reflection.App, and under the sign up and start today button is their tagline. It's private, secure, and free. You have just like sung such beautiful ballads of love to my heart with those 3 words: private, secure, and free. Yes, when you download it, you turn on security. You can put it in with your PIN, you can put it in with biometrics, whatever. But the idea of a journal, right? A space where you put your private thoughts, is the sanctity of that privacy. And so first and foremost, they want you to sign up and use your own security, but then they encrypt every note. So it is only readable on the devices that you're signed into and however encryption works. I'm just trusting that that's a real thing, but I'm pretty sure that it's a real thing. You cannot like share them or anything. Like I don't even think I can take a screenshot of my app. Like it's got a lot of robust security features to make sure it works. It is free. When you click on their free statement, you get a lot of information. All of the core features are free and will remain free forever. So this is a big high-tech win. We love things that are free. You don't need an education account. You don't need to get fancy with it. The good thing to know is that the premium features are things like uploading photos, rich text formatting, like lists and stuff like that, custom tags, and then insights and analytics. I know Josh is ready to pay for this just so he can get the analytics.
Love me some analytics.
For your use, it's private, it's secure, it's free. Now, what got me into it? Why do I think that this works and it will help us with our educational practices? They have a couple of guides that I think are really awesome. The reason I got into this as a daily practice is when I downloaded it, I started one of their 14-day guides right away. And every day it sent me a little push notification that said, hey, what's up today? And I went in and I checked out day 1, day 2, day 3. And they would ask me questions and ask me very ask the questions in a very different way. So it wasn't every day like, how do you feel about food? And then the next day, how do you feel about cats? It's like Epictetus of the Greek history said, blah, blah, blah. What do you think about as this relates to your family relationships, right? Like, whoa, pretty deep. But that practice got me reflecting on a daily basis for 14 days, and I kept the practice moving forwards. It sends you one notification every day. You can probably increase it, I don't know, but I love that too. I don't want to be bombarded by things, but it'll prompt me once a day. Yeah. What you thinking? What's on your mind? And you can go in there and you can either free write, or at the top of the app, as soon as you load it, they always have a rotating prompt there. It's not a prompt of the day. It's just every time you load the app, there's a different prompt right up there at the top. That's sometimes it's Brene Brown, sometimes it's Greek historians and philosophers. Like sometimes it's just an interesting statement, like almost like a fortune cookie. Yeah. This app will guide you through the practice of thinking critically, and thinking consistently. And I think that in itself is the practice we want to drive our students to do. And so how you could pair this in an educational context, of course, would be require your students to journal every day, or once a week, or twice or three times a week, but they would maybe focus their reflections on your classroom experience. That's it. You know what I mean? Like this is not an education app per se. It's not ed tech first. Yeah. But the practice it has itself to make you reflect and make you reflect consistently. You just need to put your prompt out there for your students to do every day, and then this app will do the rest of the work. Boom. It's better than an intern.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's better than an intern. Don't get too crazy. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, I like that. I've looked at it. Like the prompts are cool that it kind of has. I like the reflection guides. There's a kind of like it asks you kind of what you want to focus on, and then it looks like it's prompting you, right? I will say tag just for education. Like, well, it's not an education first app. Like you said, I think this would be a good app to use with your students for reflection. Like obviously there's other ways to do reflection journals through different tools in education, but this tool, it's free. It's designed for this component. And like you said, there's this kind of cool, like insights thing that you can get a hold of without even paying for like heavy analytics or things like that. That gives you kind of like, you have to categorize your entries. And it kind of gives you information on each of those entries. So I can see this being kind of a really cool way of like having your students kind of do reflection throughout the course and get kind of a feel for how they've felt over time within the course, right? Or different takeaways. You can bookmark, you can save stuff, you can tag everything. So it's like it gives your students like a database of entries that they can go back and look at, or if they want to look at what they were thinking that day or that type of situation.
And that's where like I've had some folks emphasize, and we've even done an episode on Twitter for Education. Like Twitter for Education can meet that. If you're using Twitter, you can have students post these kinds of things every day, hashtag them, stuff like that. But the number one concern I've always gotten about Twitter is, well, it's public, right? And for some students, that is an actual issue. For some students, it just makes them uncomfortable. This is completely private, completely secure. They would either not submit this to you. They would have just to acknowledge that they've done it. Or maybe they do work that's based on their reflections. They'd have to use quotes from it or whatever. But maybe they do take a screenshot or two, or they copy and paste some of the content over to you in a discussion forum. That's up to you as to how you would assess it. But very simply, for free, every note, every reflection entry has to be marked as either a highlight, a low light, or a free write. So was it a good thing, a good experience, a bad experience, or a negative experience, or just general free write? So you have to tag it one of those three things. And then after that type of entry, you have, 7 free tags that you can use. Mind, body, soul, work, play, love, reflect, and reset. And so that wouldn't necessarily support you for free to make like a classroom tag, and I want to have a metacognition tag, and I want to have a socio-metacognition tag. Like you couldn't do those kinds of things unless you paid for it or had them pay. Yeah. But for free, you could use those tags to just get some general sorting for your students. And then, as it goes by those guides, at the end of the month, they have for free monthly guides where you reflect back on the month of March. So it shows you how many highlights you had, how many lowlights you had, and it prompts you to think about, and then I think it shows you those highlights and lowlights related to the tags that they offer, mind, body, soul, etc. And so you can say like, oh, all of my lowlights are related to my body. Like this shows me that I feel maybe negatively about my body, while all of my highlights are about mind and soul. Now, it's not going to be that, 100% black and white, but you'll get that kind of data every month. Like, oh, I had not too many lowlights this month. That's great. How do you pair that to your educational content? Maybe you just encourage your students to use lowlights when they don't like something or they don't understand something. Use highlights when they get it and it's working well for them. There you go. They've got easy categories. Oh, yeah. They can start using it for your classroom.
Yeah. It's easy to use. It's got a dark mode in case anybody's curious, so that wins me over.
Mine's on.
And so I check it out. It's Reflection.App. Pretty simple. And you can literally just jump in. I would love to say there's like tons of things you can learn about, but it's literally jump in. It gives you a prompt. You start writing. It's that simple. So yeah, it's pretty cool. With that said, it is the end of our time together, folks, for this episode. I know you're all sad, but don't worry. We'll be back next week. And actually, we'll be back next week with a great episode. So we are about to kick off a series that'll be great called Game-Based Learning, right? So we're going to be looking at what is game-based learning. We've talked a little bit about gamification before on the High Tech Podcast. If you missed that episode, go check it out in season 1. We're going to focus more on it. We've got some fun return guests. I'm not going to tell you who yet, but they're coming back. You've heard them before. They're going to give us a little bit more information on game-based learning, but I'm really excited to kick off this series and dive into what I think is a hot topic in education. It's always kind of been that game-based learning and gamification has always kind of been one of those areas that people can gravitate towards. So I'm interested as a sometimes skeptic to jump in and talk more about.
That's a hashtag right there. Sometimes skeptic.
Sometimes skeptic. Hashtag sometimes skeptic. Not always. Anyway, with that said, just a reminder, you can find us at High Tech Podcast on Twitter. Hit us up there. You can email us at inbox@hightechpod.us. It's debatable. You can hit us up both of those ways. In either one, send us that animal picture. I'm not going to remind you what it is because you should remember from the beginning. If you don't,
it had a top
go back.
hat.
It's that easy. It had a top hat, yes. So, and it was not a picture of the app top hat. We've talked about that before. That's not what we're talking about. So send us in one of those two places. Please hit us up on Twitter. We'd love to connect with you. And then also, if you've been listening to us on your podcast platform but haven't checked out our website, like Will mentioned earlier, check out our website at hightechpod.us. That is where all of our resource pages and stuff that we release on apps and things that we talk about are there. So there's some fun nuggets of information that we don't include in the actual episode that you can go check out there as well. So with that said, thank you again, folks, for joining us for another episode of the High Tech Podcast, where we try to harness technology, whether in the classroom, in the virtual space, or just in our houses. Whatever it may be, we sometimes try to harness the technology. So, see ya!
See ya!